quiet neighborhood, a troubling secret, and one man's disappearance that would haunt a community for years. Could a single, overlooked clue be the key to unraveling it all? In the stillness of Amberwood Hills, where life was meant to pass peacefully, an event so inexplicable disrupted the calm and left a mark on every resident's heart. Imagine familiar streets suddenly shrouded in whispers of doubt, as if every door and window hid a story waiting to be told. This is the beginning of a mystery that slowly unravels the truth behind a disappearance that shook the town to its core. Welcome to Amberwood Hills, a picturesque town nestled between rolling hills and a meandering river. Known for its serene evenings and the comforting rhythm of everyday life, residents here once trusted that nothing could disturb their gentle way of living. So much so that many families even left their doors unlocked at night, a silent testament to the close-knit trust shared among neighbors. Yet that idyllic confidence was shattered on the day Richard Moretti vanished without a trace. Richard was a man of many layers. To some, he was an introspective soul, and an avid chess player who spent quiet evenings pondering life's intricate puzzles. To others, he was the embodiment of ambition, a man constantly seeking to improve his life and lend a hand to those in need. However, beneath the warm smiles and friendly gestures lay an undercurrent few dared to acknowledge. Richard battled bouts of anxiety and depression. In a town like Amberwood Hills, where mental health was discussed only in whispered tones, this struggle would prove to be a crucial part of his story. Raised in a modest home, Richard was the youngest of 3 siblings. His father worked tirelessly at the local paper mill, a cornerstone of the town's livelihood, while his mother devoted herself to the church choir, filling their home with melodies of hope and resilience. For years, Richard appeared content, blending seamlessly into the fabric of community life, always ready with a smile, always prepared to offer a helping hand. And yet, the day he vanished left behind a lingering echo of unanswered questions and a palpable void. In the midst of this unfolding tragedy, Amberwood Hills was not only grappling with Richard's absence, but also confronting wider challenges. At that time, the town faced an economic downturn. The very paper mill that had fueled its prosperity was forced to lay off many workers, and tensions simmered beneath the surface. In this environment of economic strain and growing isolation, personal struggles could easily remain hidden behind a facade of resilience. Despite these hardships, the community held together. Neighbors rallied around one another through small gatherings, local events, and quiet acts of solidarity. Richard Moretti had been an integral thread in this tightly woven tapestry, and his disappearance prompted confusion and profound sadness. Friends, family, and local authorities were left questioning how they could have missed the signs, if the signals of his internal struggle had been there all along. The haunting case of Richard Moretti unfolds against this complex backdrop. A man whose sudden disappearance ignited an investigation that forced everyone, from his closest friends to town officials, to confront lingering uncertainties. This narrative delves deeply into themes of mental health, social isolation, and the far-reaching impact a single tragedy can have on a community. The morning of July 14th, our approximate timeline for this account, marked the beginning of a series of events that would soon shatter the calm of Amberwood Hills. Richard's close friend, Carla Gomez, arrived at his home as she had countless times before, expecting to pick him up for their weekly volunteer drive at the community center. That day, however, the familiar scene was abruptly interrupted. When Carla approached Richard's front door, she found it unlocked, an anomaly in a house known for the precision and care of its owner. Inside, the air felt heavier. On the kitchen counter, Carla's eyes fell upon a note that looked, at first, like an innocuous grocery list. Yet there was something decidedly unusual. The note ended in mid-sentence, as though Richard had been interrupted while writing. His keys were still there, resting on the counter. A detail that once seemed trivial now spoke volumes. Richard was known for his meticulous nature. He was never careless. The sight sent a cold wave of unease through her. Something had interrupted him. But what? Perhaps he stepped out for a short walk. She tried to rationalize. But even as she murmured those words, a nagging feeling made it clear that this was not a simple oversight. As the morning wore on, Carla's unease intensified with every unanswered call to Richard's phone. Desperate for any sign of his whereabouts, she reached out to mutual friends, only to be met with similar silence. No one had heard from him, and every passing minute compounded her growing anxiety. With the daylight waning, the initial perplexity transformed into a deep dread that gripped not just Carla, but also began to ripple through the community. Unable to ignore the mounting concerns any longer, Carla contacted the local police. Their initial response was calm, almost dispassionate. Give it a bit more time. Adults can come and go as they please. In a larger city, such a statement might be acceptable, but in Amberwood Hills, a town where community trust and mutual watchfulness were the norm, this reassurance felt woefully inadequate. An unlocked door and the disappearance of a well-known, dependable friend were matters too significant to be dismissed lightly. By mid-afternoon, rumors began to swirl through Amberwood Hills. In hushed tones at local diners and during brief encounters on the sidewalks, people exchanged theories. Some suggested that Richard may have left intentionally, driven by the pressures of mounting financial troubles that had plagued the town. Others quietly speculated that a sudden mental health crisis might have pushed him away. A disturbing notion, given that many close to him were aware of his private battles with anxiety and depression. As dusk approached, the tension escalated further with the emergence of a new and deeply unsettling clue. The following day, a blood-stained letter was discovered in the town's communal mail drop box. The letter bore no signature, only a stark message, and the chilling inscription, "For the truth." Its presence sent shockwaves throughout the community. Neighbors and local authorities alike found themselves grappling with questions. What did this letter mean? Was it a genuine cry for help, a taunt directed at those investigating Richard's disappearance, or a meticulously staged misdirection meant to deepen the mystery? Within a span of just 48 hours, Amberwood Hills transformed from a town defined by its slow, predictable pace into the setting of a real-life thriller. Every whispered conversation, every piece of circumstantial evidence began to form a darker narrative. A narrative in which a trusted friend was missing, unsettling clues pointed to a potential hidden conflict, and a cryptic message fueled both suspicion and fear. As the community struggled to piece together the fragments of what might have occurred, the investigation took on multiple angles. Some local residents recalled odd encounters in the days leading up to July 14th. A neighbor spotting an unfamiliar car lingering near Richard's home at odd hours, or another remarking on the unsettling silence that sometimes fell over the street when the day was at its busiest. Each of these details, while seemingly minor on its own, now contributed to an overall picture of uncertainty and fear. This confluence of events, the disrupted routine, the incomplete note, the eerie discovery of a blood-stained letter, left Amberwood Hills with more questions than answers. The community, once bound together by trust, now found itself gripped by an atmosphere of quiet paranoia and desperation for truth. Every resident wondered if they had unwittingly missed the signs, and if perhaps they were now looking at each other with newfound suspicion. In the unfolding hours and days, the search for Richard Moretti had morphed into a larger quest to reclaim the sense of security and identity that defined Amberwood Hills. As the hours turned to days, local law enforcement treated Richard Moretti's disappearance with utmost seriousness. Under the leadership of Detective Alan Pierce, the investigation commenced with standard protocols: comprehensive searches of Richard's home, detailed interviews with friends, family, and co-workers, and a thorough review of local security camera footage. Investigators combed through phone records and computer files in search of a digital trail that might reveal his whereabouts. Yet, the deeper the inquiry went, the more perplexing the situation became. Richard's bank account showed no unusual activity, no large withdrawals, no suspicious transfers, while his social media presence remained calm. The final post a lighthearted comment about a neighborhood dog he had recently adopted. If this was a planned disappearance, it was executed with a precision that left little trace of chaos. Attention soon turned to the blood-stained letter discovered at the communal mail drop. Although only partially legible, fragments of the note hinted at desperation. Phrases such as "debt," "can't do this anymore," "it's better if," were visible. However, no definitive clue emerged directly linking the letter to Richard. Curiously, the letter's postmark was from the neighboring county rather than Amberwood Hills, and while forensic tests confirmed the blood was human, determining its source was a painstaking process. Whether this letter was a genuine cry for help or a staged distraction, it only deepened the urgency of the investigation. As local authorities expanded their search, tips began pouring in from anxious residents. Some citizens insisted they had seen Richard browsing a second-hand bookstore an hour away, while others claimed he was spotted hitchhiking on the highway. Most of these leads, however, ended in dead ends. Amid the uncertainty, two critical pieces of information emerged. First, a neighbor across the street recalled a late-night visitor at Richard's house days before his disappearance. A tall figure in a hood engaged in a heated argument that sent echoes through the quiet home. Although the witness couldn't identify the individual, this detail suggested that conflict might have played a role in the unfolding events. Second, an old acquaintance from out of town contacted the police with a claim that Richard had recently reached out about an urgent financial matter. The conversation, abruptly cut short, left the possibility that financial desperation could be linked to his disappearance, or perhaps hinted at something even more sinister. By the end of that week, a palpable tension had gripped Amberwood Hills. The local diner buzzed with hushed theories. The library became a hub for missing person flyers, and every street corner seemed to echo the same unsettling question: where is Richard Moretti? In many disappearance cases, the days that follow are crucial. As the clock ticked on, the community found itself caught in a struggle between fading hope and the rising tide of fear. The investigation forced everyone to confront a persistent, haunting question. Was Richard in danger, or was he the architect of his own mysterious vanishing act? The first theory to emerge centered around money troubles. Richard had hinted to a close friend that he was under significant financial stress, perhaps from medical bills or an unwise investment. Some believed an unpaid debt led to threats, forcing Richard to flee or prompting foul play. Could the late-night visitor have been a creditor or an enforcer, or was this rumor blown out of proportion by a town prone to gossip? A second theory hinged on an old acquaintance, Jordan Keller, someone Richard had known briefly in college. Jordan told police he'd received a frantic phone call, with Richard mentioning he had discovered something potentially life-altering, but the call dropped before details could be shared. Could Jordan be withholding information? Or was Richard simply confiding in an old friend about his mental state, leading to paranoid conclusions? Another angle that cannot be ignored is Richard's mental health. Those closest to him knew he battled with anxiety and depression, though he rarely spoke of it. In a town like Amberwood Hills, mental health resources were scarce and often stigmatized. Some began to wonder if Richard might have reached a breaking point, choosing to disappear rather than confront looming challenges. But if that were true, where was he now? And what about the blood-stained letter? Was it his cry for help or something far more nefarious? Lastly, there's Richard's own family dynamic to consider. He was the youngest of three. His siblings, Marie and Jonathan Moretti, had their own friction with Richard, stemming from unresolved inheritance disputes after their parents passed. Could a family conflict have escalated? Marie publicly dismissed the idea, but suspicion lingered. Each theory brought more questions than answers, and each suspect or angle carried enough weight that you, the viewer, are left to piece together this puzzle. What do you think? Was Richard targeted for financial gain? Or is there a possibility he orchestrated his own disappearance to escape personal demons? Let us know your theories in the comments. The community, rocked by fear and uncertainty, looked to the police for answers. But behind the scenes, tension was building among those who knew Richard best. Friendships frayed, accusations flew, and everyone began to question how well they really knew this quiet, caring man. As the investigation reached its peak, multiple theories had surfaced, and yet none brought the definitive answer everyone so desperately sought. Detective Alan Pierce, together with a team of dedicated volunteer search parties, scoured the nearby woods, combed through long-abandoned properties, and followed every lead, however remote. Tip after tip was pursued, but the puzzle of Richard Moretti's disappearance stubbornly resisted resolution. In many missing person cases, there comes a moment when official efforts slow, leaving families and the community in an agonizing limbo. For Amberwood Hills, that moment arrived months after Richard vanished. Despite numerous interviews, relentless rumor chases, and even the involvement of private investigators, no conclusive evidence emerged, and the mystery remained unsolved. Within this state of uncertainty, opinions among the locals diverged sharply. Some residents clung to hope that Richard had simply chosen to start over, believing that he might return when he was ready to embrace a new chapter. Others, however, were convinced that something far darker had taken place, suggesting secret debts or a personal betrayal that turned deadly. Each theory added to the community's growing collection of unanswered questions, and every theory underscored the profound emptiness left behind by his absence. So, where do we stand now? Let's recap the most critical discoveries in this case. 1. An unfinished note in a door left unlocked, hinting at a disruption in Richard's impeccable routine. 2. A mysterious late-night visitor seen near his home, a figure potentially linked to mounting financial pressures. 3rd, a blood-stained letter bearing a cryptic, despair-laden message that, while evocative, provided no conclusive proof of motive. 4th, lingering family tensions and rumors of mental health struggles that furnished potential reasons for either flight or foul play. Even with these fragments of evidence, the core question endures: where did Richard Moretti go? Had the case been resolved, or had a body been found, the narrative might have taken on an even darker tone. Instead, what remains is an open-ended mystery that fuels endless speculation. We may never know which thread leads directly to the truth. The tangled web of clues only deepens the uncertainty. However, one certainty remains clear. Richard's disappearance profoundly impacted Amberwood Hills, sparking deeper conversations about mental health support, the importance of community trust, and the silent pressures that can drive an individual to the edge. Just when it seemed that the case had gone cold, a new twist emerged. A single photograph, mailed anonymously to the local newspaper, showing a man resembling Richard in a bustling city several miles away. Was it truly him, or a case of mistaken identity? That provocative question lingers in the minds of investigators and residents alike, leaving everyone grasping for an answer that still eludes them. At the end of the day, the story of Richard Moretti serves as a powerful reminder that every person harbors hidden struggles, challenges, and secrets known only to themselves. In a world where support systems can be scarce and judgment is often swift, these personal battles may become overwhelming, sometimes leading to choices that haunt both the individual and the community. Richard's disappearance has left Amberwood Hills with a lingering emptiness and a myriad of unanswered questions. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the twists and turns of a case that echoes truths about the human experience. If you found this compelling, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into mysteries that challenge what we think we know. Richard Moretti vanished. Theories swirled, clues emerged, but no one truly knows what happened that night. So, what do you think? Did Richard escape a dark fate, or was he the victim of one? Drop your theories in the comments. Every insight brings us closer to the truth. And if you crave more true crime mysteries, hit subscribe, because sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. Every voice, every perspective brings us one step closer to understanding the unknown.